Okay, so this video is about the basic way to embed quotes. So this is the first step when you're using a quote and you want to talk about it in your essay. This is how you're going to actually construct your sentences properly. As you're watching this video, you should have a piece of paper and a pen with you so that you can take some notes. And when you've finished watching the video, you should practice this skill with some more quotes so that you get it perfect and then you can show your teacher. If you would like to pause the video, you can go back and watch it again. Watch it as many times as you need to make sure that you really understand this skill. Okay, so here I've got a passage from the book. Of course, this is far too long to use for a quote, so I'm only going to use a short section of this. But I've put the whole thing here so that we can have a look at how we find that good quote first. And as I read this, we also want to be thinking about the main ideas that are in this passage so we know why we're using this in our essay as well. It's easy to have a quote, but you also need to explain why it's important. So I'm going to put a note down here, important ideas, and as we read through this, we'll think about the important ideas. So as I read this, you should read along with the words as well. Suddenly, in the early spring, an alarming thing was discovered. Snowball was secretly frequenting the farm by night. The animals were so disturbed that they could hardly sleep in their stalls. Every night, it was said, he came creeping in under the cover of darkness and performed all kinds of mischief. He stole the corn, he upset the milk pails, he broke the eggs, he trampled the seed beds, he gnawed the bark off the fruit trees. Whenever anything went wrong, it became usual to attribute it to Snowball. If a window was broken or a drain was blocked up, someone was certain to say that Snowball had come in the night and done it. And when the key of the store shed was lost, the whole farm was convinced that Snowball had thrown it down the well. Okay, so this passage is all to do with Snowball and how the animals start to blame Snowball for their problems. Anything at all that goes wrong, they start to blame Snowball. So, of course, one of the key ideas here is that Snowball is used as a scapegoat. First, it's the pigs who start to use him as a scapegoat, and soon all of the animals start to use him as a scapegoat. And then we have to ask ourselves, well, why are they using him as a scapegoat? What is the point of that? Well, partly it comes down to fear, because fear is one of the biggest things in this novel that motivates the characters. If they're afraid of something, they're more likely to listen to Napoleon and trust him because he keeps telling them that he will do the right thing. So fear, we could say fear Fear of Snowball helps the animals to have more trust in Napoleon and the other pigs. So that's one thing. And also the fact that they're focusing on Snowball, I would say this helps the pigs because the animals are distracted from anything else that's going wrong in the farm. So there are things that are going wrong on the farm at the moment. They're running out of food. The pigs are getting a lot of power. Napoleon has taken a lot of power for himself, even though this is supposed to be an equal society. So by having something like Snowball to focus on and to be afraid of, the pigs are distracted. So the animals are distracted. The pigs can distract the other animals from these bad things that are happening and focus their attention on being afraid of Snowball. So these are our key ideas. Now we just need a quote from this passage that really sums up these key ideas. So we just want something short, one sentence, or even sometimes half a sentence, to show that Snowball's being used as a scapegoat. So for me, I think it's this sentence here. Whenever anything went wrong, it became usual to attribute it to Snowball. Attribute means it was the blame, so that it was usual to say that the reason for this was Snowball. So I think this here is quite a good quote. So I'm just going to paste that down here. And of course, when we have a quote, we want to put it in quotation marks. Okay. So I think this quote really sums up this whole paragraph. Okay, so I'm going to move down here, and now I have a pretty basic way of using this quote. Now, this way is actually not a good way of doing it. I'm going to turn this into a good way though. So I've got my ideas here. The pigs begin to use Snowball as a scapegoat. Okay, yep, that's fine. Then I've got the quote. Whenever anything went wrong, it became usual to attribute it to Snowball. Okay. The pigs used the fear of Snowball to distract the animals from the things that were really going wrong on the farm. Okay, so I've got all my ideas here. That's great. And I've used the quote. However, the thing that's going wrong here is I've got a sentence here, then I've got a full stop. Then I've got the quote, and then I've got a full stop. And then I've got another sentence. Okay, I'm going to put a note down here. Don't leave quotes all alone. This quote is isolated. Isolated means all alone. There's a full stop here after the quote, and there's a full stop before the quote. That's not good. We want this quote to be with the rest of the sentence. Okay, so I'm going to show you a way of doing that. So what we would do here, the pigs begin to use Snowball as a scapegoat. Rather than a full stop, I'm going to change that to a comma, which means this sentence is still going. And here I'm going to put, for example, and then I can put a colon to introduce my example. So the pigs begin to use Snowball as a scapegoat. For example, whenever anything went wrong, it became usual to attribute it to Snowball. Now, that is the whole sentence. Now, there's still one thing I need to fix up, which is the capital letter here. I need to change that to a lowercase because I've still got the sentence going here. If you don't put a colon here, that doesn't really matter. It still works the same. So the pigs begin to use Snowball as a scapegoat. For example, whenever anything went wrong, it became usual to attribute it to Snowball. That's one whole sentence. It's flowing really nicely. If I took out these quotation marks, this is how you can test to see whether you've done it well. If I took out these quotation marks, that sentence would still flow nicely. The pigs begin to use Snowball as a scapegoat. For example, whenever anything went wrong on the farm, it became usual to attribute it to Snowball. That sentence still flows nicely. That's how you know that you've done it well. But of course, because it is a quote, we will keep those quotation marks there. Now, the second part, after you use a quote, you should always explain the importance of it. You'll, I'm sure, remember the acronym TEAL. So we've got topic sentence, evidence, explanation, and then link. Well, this part here, and I'm going to highlight that, this part here, evidence and explanation, in your essay writing, you should have, this doesn't just happen once, this happens over and over again, because in a particular paragraph, you should have 2 to 3, sometimes even more quotes in each paragraph, which means you have a quote, then you have an explanation of that quote, then you have another quote, then you have an explanation of that quote. Okay, so here, this is just introducing the quote, so that doesn't count as an explanation. You introduce the quote, you use the quote, and then you explain the quote. And the explanation, what that means is explain how this proves explain how this proves your point in relation to the essay topic. So you've got a point to make, whatever your topic is. Now, this comes back to our important ideas here. Why am I even using this quote in the first place? Well, I want to show, whoops, gone too far. I want to show that the pigs are using Snowball as a scapegoat, and I want to say why they're doing that, because it's not enough just to say that they are doing it. I have to explain myself. So the pigs used the fear of Snowball to distract the animals from the things that were really going wrong on the farm. I could even add in here, now this is a good way of doing it. I could put here, this shows that the pigs. So by saying this shows, I'm linking it to the quote. I'm explaining what the quote shows. Okay. So this is a much better way to talk about your quotes in your essay. I'm just going to show you one more thing. If I scroll down here, introducing quotes. So I'm going to paste our example here. When I'm talking about introducing quotes, I'm talking about this part here. So for example, instead of for example, there's some other things you could say. For instance, or such as. Now, in this case, I'd probably say such as when, and then I would go on with the quote there. So these can be substituted here. This shows, well, the shows, I'm going to put that in a different color. That can be substituted for these words here. Okay, so instead of shows, I could say this highlights that. Okay, it depends what I'm trying to really say here, but this quote really highlights this idea. This quote demonstrates. Now, it's good to use a variety of these through your whole essay. If you use shows every time, I will notice that when I'm reading your paragraph and it might say shows, 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 shows. But if sometimes you say highlights, sometimes you say stresses, sometimes you say creates, sometimes you say describes, it shows a variety in your language. So you should try and mix up these words occasionally. But the main thing you need to keep in mind is don't leave those quotes alone. Use your commas and then introduce the quote into your sentence. Okay, now I've got an example for you to do now. Your turn. I've got two quotes here. You can do both of them. So this first one is nice and short. Napoleon was always right. Who says that? Boxer, of course. Why does he say it? Well, he's blindly agreeing with whatever Napoleon says. He is one of the loyal followers, and that's something that helps Napoleon gain power. So that's the key ideas of this particular quote. You want to think about those, and then you want to have a go at writing this into a few sentences. I've got another one here as well, which is also a Boxer quote. I would not have believed that such things could happen on our farm. It must be due to some fault in ourselves. The solution as I see it, is to work harder. Now this is Boxer as well, after the slaughter of his friends. So you want to be able to think about what is the key message of this? What is the key idea? Why is it important? And then have a go at putting it into an example like this. And you can use some of these different words as well. Once you've done that, you should take this to your teacher and see what they think and see if you got it correct.